therapy for a while because she had a horrible childhood, but she stopped going to therapy because she thought it was silly to tell a perfect stranger things about her mother who had long since disappeared from her life. Um, so my both of my parents grew up and instilling in me the belief that we should really be able to take care of our own problems. We really should. And if it was a really big problem, then you had to hide it really, really well. You just had to really work at it. Um, yeah. So my dad was the alcoholic in the home, and so was his mother, who lived with us upstairs. And it was very clear what the problems were in our family. It was food and it was alcohol. My father would tell me, "Don't get fat like your mother." Actually, so did my first husband. Don't get fat like your mother. Um, and I was a skinny little kid, very picky eater. I always liked the things on the other side of the gray sheet more than the things that came at breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And I would save up all my money to go down to Sadie's corner store and buy whatever penny sugar I could put in my pockets. And I would take back bottles, recycle things for a nickel or 2 cents or whatever it was. And you could get stuff for 2 cents or a nickel back then. Anyway, so I didn't start gaining weight because of my food choices until I was um, entering into puberty. And then I couldn't hide anything. It went as who used to say that? Somebody used to say it. Rhoda, I think, used to say, I should just apply this directly to my hips. Um, yeah. I mean, my mom got fat, I got fat. I don't think I heard about bulimia until I was an adult and I hated to vomit. Vomiting had no um, appeal to me at all. Um, and I really hated my body for as long as I can remember. I always was just not very strong. I wasn't very flexible. I didn't like to sweat. I still really don't like to sweat very much. And yeah, exercise to me was limited to what I had to do in the gym when I got into high school and those presidential physical fitness tests, which were humiliating. Um, so I would get chubby and then I would go on a diet with my mom and I would lose weight. And as soon as I got to the right number, I would start eating the food I liked again. And this was the story of my life. So I was a yo-yo dieter. The way I rewarded myself was to eat more of the stuff that I am allergic to, that I cannot just have one of. So whenever I was on a diet, I would, not eat any of that stuff so I could lose weight. But and I did this like, okay, I did it through grammar school, I did it through high school, I did it through college. Um, and what was really motivating for me was that I wanted a boyfriend and I wanted to be popular. I wanted to have a backbone that you could see, if you looked at my back. Because Judy Ferguson had a backbone like that. She just looked like a skeleton. And Twiggy was very popular when I was growing up, and there was no way my body would ever look like Twiggy's. It just isn't made that way. Even if I lost weight, I still was small on top and big on the bottom. That's just always the way it was. And I blamed my body for being not in the clique. I always had friends, but not in the clique. And I blame my body for not having a boyfriend, and I blame my body. So I would lose a little bit of weight, feel more attractive. And sure enough, somebody would ask me out or pay attention to me. And then I felt like I was worthwhile and I could be in the company of somebody who liked me. Because when I by myself, that wasn't the case. And then they would do something really stupid, like, like prefer being with their friends to being with me, or I don't know. They would just mess up somehow. And then I would break up with them and go back to my true love, which came in rappers. And yeah. So I have to say that I was mystified by human beings and how people would deal with things like conflict, because when I had a conflict, I would just break up with somebody. When I got older, if I had a conflict on the job, I would quit and find another job. If I had a conflict with a roommate, I would move out and find another place to live. I moved out of apartments. I moved out of state. I moved, there was one year I counted 13 places as home. Um, I just I would cut and run. That was my only coping mechanism. And I thought it was my job to bury it, eat it, swallow it, until I couldn't anymore. And then I would just explode. So that was the story of my life until I had a baby. After I got married, I had a baby. And when I was pregnant, I was already 30 pounds overweight. And then I gained 50 pounds when I was pregnant and I lost 25, but that was the baby and the fluids that had to do with the pregnancy. And I just couldn't lose that baby weight, what they call baby weight. And back when I was pregnant, Jane Fonda's videos were very popular. And there seemed to be a belief that if you really cared about yourself, you would be slender and attractive and wealthy and have, good friends and influence people and all that stuff and be happy. And I really believed that if I could get that, that I would be happy. Um, so my daughter was born. I was for the first time friendless because all my friends were still working. They didn't, have home. My husband wanted me to have play groups, but the last thing I wanted was more people around who were talking about diaper changes and when you feed a baby and all that. I just wanted I would hold her in my arms, and when he came home from work, I would put her in his arms and walk to the grocery store down the street so I didn't have to bend over to talk to somebody. I mean, I was just really hungry for adult company again. And I was very lonely. And 10 months after she was born, my father died. My father was, he and I had a very strained relationship, but I didn't want him to die. And he died over the course of 8 weeks of alcoholism. And those two events were just major disruptions in my life. I didn't know how to deal with a baby, and I didn't know how to deal with grief. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had an excuse to go into therapy. So I did. And there was a neighborhood health center down the street. And when they found out, they did this initial call and they asked me if there was any alcoholism in my family. And I said, well, yes, but why? And they said, well, we have this special grant for children of alcoholics. So if you have chemical dependency in your family, you can have free therapy for 2 years, which was amazing because my husband and I were always poor and we didn't have any money. And I didn't know how I was going to afford it, but there you go. So I cried for 2 years and then it was going to cost me $20 for a copay and I could do that for a little while. But so therapy introduced me to people who were in therapy. And then somebody told me about 12-step groups. And somebody told me my neighbor got abstinent and at an OA meeting that used the gray sheet for the food plan to lose weight. And she lost 100 pounds. It seemed to me like overnight, but it was really over the course of the winter. And and so I went with her to a meeting, and that was my first introduction to some kind of gray sheet abstinence, but it wasn't without exception. And then I lost a lot of weight in a very short amount of time. And as soon as I got down to my goal, I left because that's what I do. And for 8 or 9 years, I was without a program and trying to forget the fact that I had been saying I was a compulsive eater for, 4 months or however long it was I was in there and avoiding anybody that I saw that from the meetings and all that kind of stuff. So it took me 8 or 9 years to come back. But in July of 1995, I finally surrendered. And I went to the gray sheet meeting, even though, because I had done the steps out of the big book and in another program. And that's what I got out of that program was a relationship with my higher power. And all of my internal messages at that point was go back to OA, go back to, go back, go back, go back. I went to OA first, and they had a meeting at the same time as the gray sheet meeting across the river. And the first OA meeting I went to that started at 9:15, people were talking about relapsing, like one after another, but they didn't call it relapsing. They called it having a slip. And I just knew that there was a gray sheet meeting on the other side of the river. And I took myself out of that meeting and went over there. I don't know. I don't really remember. It wasn't a plan. And I sat there and I cried. I came home with a sponsor, and my life changed forever. And I have I got a divorce. I got married again many years later to someone that I adore, and someone who has only known me abstinent, and someone who doesn't question my need to be abstinent or my desire. And so I have love in my life, and I've learned how to be honest. First learned how to be honest with my food, which was harder for me than anything. I could talk to you about my awful experiences. I could talk to you about incest easier than I could talk to you about the food that I actually ate or wanted to eat or did eat and the way that I wanted food. So being honest about my food opened the door to another possibility of living as a real human being who had feelings that she didn't know how to deal with, who had experience and people that were difficult. And I learned how to stay abstinent through all of that, which meant I had to learn how to deal with all of that somehow. But it started with putting my food in order and keeping it that way. And so today I just want to say I want to offer lots of encouragement to people. This is a hard road to travel. It's awkward sometimes and uncomfortable sometimes and inconvenient sometimes, but it's so worth it. And it's always doable. And I've met the most wonderful people who are also gray sheet abstinent, and I trust them. That's my time. I won an award for my time. Anyway, love you guys. Thanks for listening. I look forward to hearing all of you.